I'm Fiz Markham. I'm a final year undergraduate at Royal Holloway, finishing summer of 2020. And apart from actually studying for a Bachelor of Music, I'm also a folk musician and a folk dancer. In fact, my hobby is Morris dancing. So the purpose of today's session is that I tell you something about the melodeon and something about playing for dance, because I think the two should be connected in terms of English folk music. So I will cover all some technicalities of the instrument, various kinds of instruments you can obtain, how to obtain them, where you might go and play. But I really want to get over to you, that's just one aspect. The real thing that you need to know is how to actually play the instrument so that you make people want to move, whether it's to jig their feet, do social dancing or do Morris dancing, any of those things. Let me start with a story. Quite a number of years ago, I'd been thinking that I should learn how to play an instrument for Morris. I played various instruments already, and I was thinking I should learn to play one for Morris that would carry in a public space. And with this was just, at the back of my mind. It wasn't urgent. And I went to a workshop, and it's a 3-day workshop of dancing, Cotswold Morris dancing. There are various kinds of Morris dancing. I do stuff from the Cotswolds. And there are various styles of dance from various villages in the Cotswold, and each has its own set of steps, its hand movements, where you go, how you turn, what you do, this, that and the other. And we got to the 3rd day, and like everybody else, I woke up and said, my legs are so sore, I'm not sure I could face another day. And we got to a session in the morning, I think shortly before coffee, where we did a style which I had done before and nobody else had. I was quite new to my team, many of whom were there, but they did different styles. This was with my old team. So I was just amazed at how easy it seemed to dance. I'd woken up really stiff, not wondering how I was going to get to coffee, let alone lunch, or to the afternoon tea. And yes, I was dancing and enjoying it. And then it struck me, and I talked to the musician, who happened to be my team's musician. And I said, Alan, were you playing to me in that session? He said, yes, I was. You were the person who seemed to know the tradition. And so I played to what you were doing because you were a good exemplar, and then everybody else would fit in. And I thought, okay, right. So if I really want to learn, I should take up the instrument he's playing, which is a melodeon, and I should learn from him because he's very good. He was a very good musician. So thus it was. Within a week or so, I toddled off and bought this very melodeon. The melodeon is spelled melodeon, and you'll see that later on spelt out. Now, I learnt from Alan, and I learnt to play for Morris dancing. And I chose to actually learn to play by ear, although I'm very capable of reading music and have been since I was, so high. Probably low, shorten that. But there was an unexpected benefit that came from doing that, and I'll tell you that later on if you watch the whole video. I'm going to play you a tune which is actually has a known composer, Susato. It's called Moresque, and so I want to dispel the image that all tunes used by folk dancers are actually of unknown origin. So I'm going to play this as if I were doing it for my Morris team. how this works. This is actually a GD melodeon, a 2-row. It's sometimes called a diatonic button key accordion. Accordion because it has bellows, and buttons obviously for the notes. On the right hand I've got the melody notes, and on the left hand I have basses. I'll tell you a bit more about how it works a bit further on. But one of the characteristics of this box, this kind of melodeon, is that almost inevitably you need to change the direction of the bellows in order to get following notes. So you go. So you can see I need to change direction of the bellows, and in actual fact it will become apparent to you why I actually changed rows as well. So that lends itself very much to being a relatively percussive instrument. I mean, one could play very smoothly, and the Irish indeed do. They move the bellows very little, they play terribly fast, and they play a more chromatic version of this kind of instrument. But for dancing, what you need to do is to tell the dancer that they need to use their bodies in order to move up, along, wherever, and you do that with the bellows. And so with the benefit, I have an air button on the side here which lets me pull in and out, so I'm not damaging the instrument. So to play, I'm going to play one note. I'm going to play it, no, I'll play 2 notes and then you'll see the difference. That's not going to get anybody moving or anything. And this is the basics of playing for dance. You need to provide impetus, so when the person leaves the ground, as they gather up energy to move along or up, or both, that you're saying you're increasing the energy, which means you're accelerating your arms to either do a push note or accelerating out to do a pull note, or it's probably more like that. And also you leave a gap between notes, so the notation would be very legato, but in actual fact you have to interpret the music to make it danceable. I'm now going to tell you something about how the melodeon works. You should see on the right hand side of your screen just a diagrammatic version of what's actually available in this kind of box. It came off Melodeon Net, and there are lots of different kinds of melodeons which I'll discuss in a minute. But for this DG melodeon I have a row of G major and a row of D major buttons. Every button has 2 notes attached to it. So you can see I only play 4 buttons, and then I can G major to go in, the other notes to come out. And because I've got 2 rows, sometimes there's some notes which I can only play by pushing, and some notes I've got variation, and some I can only play pulling. So that gives some interesting options. So sometimes it's much easier to carry on pulling for a very fast passage rather than going like this. Sometimes you just have to change direction anyway, and you need to for rhythmic purposes. And even when you're still going in the same direction, you can sort of push, relax, push, relax, push, relax, and still be going in the same direction. On the left hand side I've got basses, which are notes and chord And you'll see, if you study the thing on the right hand side, if you want to pause the video for the moment, you'll see that there are 6 possible basses, and if you think about it, I can actually make some more chords which are 7 chords as well by mixing. So I have B major here, D major here, and then I can make B minor 7 there, so you can get some more interesting effects. Though folk music does tend to be very complex harmonically. With these following slides, I'm just going to talk where I think you need some emphasis from what you've got in front of you. Otherwise, please read it, pause it. Just like to emphasise, never buy second hand. Always work on your bellows action. One of the things I didn't say was, you might have noticed that I ornamented the tunes with little trills and little arpeggio things just by playing adjacent buttons or whisking my hands up an arpeggio. Add that when you feel confident, but don't expect to do that first of all. It all generally ornaments when you're not actually doing anything very emphatic. ABC notation is very useful. You can see there, this is the tune that I played earlier. Probably not quite precisely those notes, however, it shows you how it's actually notated if you look down the bottom. You also see that there's similar tunes that you can go to for the tune, because there'll be a number of versions of this, and also you'll notice in the red circles you can actually export files that would actually go into Sibelius. I recommend Music XML is much more useful than using MIDI. With a DG melodeon, you can obviously play in D major or G major. You can also play in E minor, which is more, you tend to find more in a Dorian mode. So that's E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D natural, and E. DG is very much the lingua franca for the kind of melodeon you would buy if you're going to participate in the folk world. Very occasionally, this is where you start. As you become more specialised, several years down the line, you might have a CG or a DA. This is actually a relatively small kind of melodeon compared to some you can get. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and you can investigate that in Melodeon Net if you want to really get into it. However, just to say, this is a 2-row. You can get 2.5 rows. So some of the accidentals will probably be on the half row, and also, for example, I said that I could only play a D, pushing in there'd be a pull D there, so you could nip across to that if you needed to do that for any particular passage. The other variations you get more basses, and sometimes you get different voices, which are like little pull things here. I don't have those, but that allows different sets of reeds to operate. I haven't said yet actually that this is a reed instrument, which you've probably gathered, and every note has 2 reeds. So if you listen very carefully, you'll notice there's a kind of beating. There's a slow dissonance between the 2 reeds. This is a known, I think in the French, the characteristic French accordion sound, that's called a dry tuning. I think the British sound's called a wet tuning. And if you get other banks of reeds, then you'll get things which are set an octave higher or octave lower, and you can choose your selection of which ones are going to be operating at any time, which will give you a thicker sound or a thinner sound, a louder sound or a quieter sound. Of course you can change volume by how much air you put through. I think that tells you everything you need to know about melodeons in general. At the top of the video, after my story about how I came to take up the melodeon, I promised I'd tell you what other benefit I actually had from learning to play by playing by ear, and that was very useful to me as a classical singer, and that is to be able to sight read for singing. Somehow in learning the melodeon by ear, I developed a sort of sense of tonic solfa which I'd never been taught and can't follow very easily on my own, but somehow I gained that skill and I could transfer that to the written page of choral music. So that's my big benefit, and maybe if you took it up you'd find a similar benefit or some other benefit of your own. So finally, say thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you'll go and look about melodeons, and you'll find some good players, people like Andy Cutting, John Kirkpatrick is very good. I'll put some names on the last slide. Thank you very much. Bye bye.